Alright guys, so here is one of the, I think, let's see, should be one of the last presentations. It's the fraternity operations. Just as important as the other presentations, although I will warn you guys this one might be a little more dry, but I'll do my best. Keep it short, concise, and it's very important. So, as always, the learning objectives for this presentation is to be able to use Robert's Rules of Order to effectively run and participate in meetings. Very important. See the big picture of the operation of the chapter, and then finally understand critical risk management information, which I'll keep right to the point. All right. So the big one, though, the one I really want you guys to understand, and will help the members, really appreciate you guys running a good, smooth meeting, is Robert's Rules of Order. So why do we use Robert's Rules of Order? Well, it's a set of rules, so this is what it is, for conduct at meetings that allows everyone to be heard and to make decisions without confusion. Because it's a time-tested method of conducting business at meetings and public gatherings, it can be adapted to fit the needs of any organization. So if you guys actually look at the, updated Robert's Rules of Order, it's a very thick book of just like all kinds of different rules. But in this presentation, I'll give you the rules of just how we operate our chapter and how do we, leave people without confusion. So, first, how we use the rules. I'll go over how do we use the agenda, how we use motions, and then I'll go over some of the important rules in Robert's Rules. So the agenda. Like I mentioned to you guys in the per presentation, you guys need to have your reports in before the officer meeting. And that way the secretary can make, and the Venerable Dean as well, and all of you guys as a whole can make the agenda very easily and then spend your time, the rest of your officer meeting, working on the actual nitty-gritty details of getting things done. So we all know the order of chapter, reports, new business, old business, new business, such and such. So the important thing is that this order is created in advance and maintained. So make sure you guys have motions ready, signed up. Make sure you have reports ready and put into the agenda. And the thing to remember, like I mentioned in per, was reports are for reporting, no business or actions. That's one of the biggest mistakes we do. And then the next one, something we don't do, we used to do really strictly, was new business must be given in advance. You guys can determine whether this is before chapter, before the officer meeting. I would suggest before the officer meeting, tell all the members if they have a motion to do or any new business that they have to turn it in before the officer meeting or before chapter, whichever you guys choose. All right, so past the agenda, we got motions. And so in motions, I'm going to cover the types of motions, how to present motions, and voting on motions. And this is where a lot of the Robert's Rules of Order comes in handy. So types of motions. So main motions, the purpose of them is to introduce items to the membership for their consideration. They cannot be made when any other motion is on the floor and yield to privileged, subsidiary, and incidental motions, which are the ones I'm going to cover now. Subsidiary motions, the purpose is to change or affect how a main motion is handled and is voted on before a main motion. Privilege motions, their purpose is to bring up items that are urgent about special or important matter unrelated to pending business. So those ones that's where you're going to have to define whether you guys want to use privilege motions or not, because they kind of go against, making sure that all motions are set on the agenda beforehand. And lastly, incidental motions are similar to privilege, where their purpose is to provide a means of questioning procedure concerning other motions and must be considered before the other motion. So just let's vote on how we're going to vote, or let's motion on how we're going to vote on it. Let's motion whether it's tabled, things like that. So, key thing is understanding presenting motions. And then after this, we'll talk about voting on them. So, I'm going to go through some steps on presenting motions. The first one is obtaining the floor. This is really crucial whether the Venerable Dean does this or the Sentinel, which can be appointed to make sure that Robert's Rules of Order are always used and enforced. But to obtain the floor, the member must wait until the last speaker is finished, rise, I hate how people always sit down, stand up and address the chair by saying Mr. Chairman or Mr. President or Brother Venerable Dean. Wait until the chair recognizes you, the Venerable Dean. The second step is to make your motion, so speak in a clear and concise manner. Always state motion affirmatively, saying I move that we, rather than I move that we do not. So never say, never say do not. Always we should do this. And avoid personalities and stay on the subject. The next step, as many of you guys know, is that another member will need to second your motion, or the chair will call for a second. So if it is not seconded, which is very rare, it is lost. But it is seconded, the chair will state your motion. The chair will say, it has been moved and seconded that we such and such, thus placing your motion before the membership for consideration and action. And the membership then either debates your motion or they may move directly to a vote, which takes another motion. So he'll say, let's go ahead and debate, and maybe they'll debate, or maybe one of the members will say, I motion that we just go straight to vote. Or the VRMD might say, I entertain that we, go directly to a vote. One key thing to remember is that once your motion is presented to the membership by the chair, it becomes assembly property and cannot be changed by you without the consent of the members. So once you guys make a motion and it's put there and it's accepted, seconded, then you can't just say, oh, I received my motion, or oh, I'm going to change my motion this way. It has to be done through Robert's Rules of Order. So someone has to motion to amend the original motion. Kind of confusing, but we'll talk a little bit about more of that later. Next step 6, is expanding on your motion. So this gets a little confusing. Like I said, you guys got a motion to change it. So the time for you to speak in favor of your motion is at this point in time, rather than any time at the time you present it. So in this, what I mean, you guys have already seen this. So you present your motion, you get it seconded, the chair states your motion. Then when you do discussion, you'll be the first one to stand up and argue in favor for it. You don't just argue for it when you motion for it. So the mover is always allowed to speak first. All comments in the debate must be directed to the chair, so not just to you. And to keep to the time limit for speaking that has been established. So when you guys have your motion on there, there'll usually be a set time for all discussions, or you can vote to have a certain time, whether it be shorter or longer. And the mover may speak again only after other speakers are finished and unless called upon by the chair. So next step is putting the question to the membership. The chair asked, are you ready to vote on the question? Or maybe someone would motion for it. So that's basically him saying, entertaining a motion for it. If there is no more discussion, a vote is taken. So on a motion to move, the previous question may be adapted. So it's either, are you ready to vote, or, I motion to move on to a vote. So now we got to the point where we're voting on a motion. There's a few different ways, and these are crucial to understanding because sometimes we use stupid hand count when we don't need to, and other times we don't use hand count when we need to. And so I'm going to go over the different ways of voting on a motion. So first one is the most easy, just by voice. The chair asks those in favor to say aye, those to say no, nay. Sorry about the typo. Any member may move for an exact count. So if it gets close. And then the next one is by roll call. So each member answers yes or no as his name is called. This method is used when a record of each person's vote is required. I don't think we've ever done that, and I don't know if there will be a time that we will, but good to know. There's also a voting by general consent. When a motion is not likely to be opposed, the chair says, if there's no objection, and then so forth. The membership shows agreement by their silence. However, one member says, just one, I object, the item must be put to a vote. So that's a really useful tool for getting some of these more mundane things done and moving the chapter along. The next one is by division. This is a slight variation of a voice vote. It does not require a count unless the chair so desires. Members raise their hands or stand. So it's other than saying aye or nay, they just raise their hand, and by his look of it, he can say whether it has passed or not. And then finally, the most official and formal way of voting is by ballot, where members write their vote on a slip of paper. This method is used when secrecy is desired. So voting in new members, pledges, and like that, all the serious stuff. It's good to mention some motions that are related to voting. There's two other motions that are commonly used that relate to voting. Motion to table. This postpones voting on a motion until another set time. So you want to say, it can either be an exact time or it can just be, when this is done, we'll put it back on or we'll bring it off the table. The next one is motion to postpone indefinitely. Now, unlike motion to table, this one motions to end the motion permanently. So if someone motions to postpone indefinitely, it's basically them trying to just get it killed immediately. So bypass everything else. If they think that there's enough opposition to it, they'll just skip debate and go right for just killing the motion. All right, so now you guys know how to present them, how to present motions, how to work through them, types of motions, and how to vote on motions. But here are some other important tips for making Robert's rules work. So allow motions out in order, so don't get off task. Like when they're listed on the agenda, follow that agenda, that list, that order. Have members obtain the floor properly. Have them raise their hand, be called on by the chair, have them raise and speak. They need to speak clearly and concisely. Always obey the rules of debate, and most importantly, be courteous. Now I just want to quickly go over through some important rules of Robert's Rules of Order. The first one is point information. So a lot of these rules will basically be things that people will state to be able to act in chapter. So these are like rules for acting. So point information is, it generally applies to information desired from the speaker. I should like to ask, the speaker a question. So point information, I want to ask Nick about this question, about this aspect. Order of the day. So this is basically a call to adhere to the agenda. If someone notices, like the sentinel like I mentioned, notices that we're getting off point or we're moving ahead when we shouldn't, someone will say this. Or there can be a vote to suspend the rules, so then we don't have to follow it. Point of order. This one's very important. I wish more people would point this one out, but it's an infraction of the rules or improper decorum in speaking. Must be raised immediately after the error is made. So this will be the main thing either the sentinel or hopefully someone will use to keep us on track and keep the rules running smoothly. Another one is divide the question. So when you say, when you motion to divide the question, so it divides a motion into two or more separate motions. They must be able to stand on their own. This one I mentioned before is amend. It's a motion to change the motion on the floor in some form, whether you're just changing a single word or if you're going to just, sometimes, like I said, once the motion's on, at the floor's property, they can literally change it to what it was, to the opposite. So your motion, say, to have this event in a certain capacity, but then they vote to have it in an exact opposite capacity. Like, I want to have a date dash with alcohol, and they vote, well, we'll have a date dash but no alcohol. So it's completely opposite. That can happen. Next rule is you can commit, refer, or recommit to a committee. This is also a really nice one for making chapter move nicely, where you state the committee to receive the question or resolution. So if you have a motion that doesn't seem like something that should be handled by the chapter, but a more exact committee like pledge committee or something, you can motion to have it go to the committee. Another important one is to suspend the rules. So it allows a violation of the Assembly's own rules, except the Constitution, guys. And the object is the suspension must be specified. So are we going to not vote on it? Are we not going to follow a time limit for discussion? Anything like that. This one is actually used quite often when we have chapter running long, is extend debate. There is one for extending chapter, but then there's one for extending debate. So say we say 10 minutes, but the debate's going really well, so you might motion to extend the debate. Or you might motion to limit the debate, opposite of that. And then there's the object to considerations, or object to consideration. This one's interesting because it's an objection must be stated before discussion or another motion is stated. So before you go into discussion or another motion is made, you just need to say, so say someone motions to consider owning sharks. I'm going to, once it gets seconded, I'm just going to say, whoa, I motion to object to consideration. I don't even think this is worth our time. And it's very similar to the motion I mentioned before of just kind of like, let's just table it indefinitely. Just another way of kind of saying it. And then this one's important, as you guys will find this in our Constitution, that it takes a 3/4 vote to overturn a officer's decision. But this is what that is. It's an appeal decision of the chair. So appeal for the Assembly to decide must be made before other business is resumed. Not debatable if related to quorum, violations of rules, or order of business. But if, say, the Venerable Dean says, I am going to enforce 2 hour long chapters. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says no to that. Or maybe he'll just say, I want only 10-minute chapters and I'm going to appeal the decision of the chair. Or I guess I can't do that, but maybe one of the members would. All right. Woo! So, that is Robert's Rules of Order. There is a document on the Google Drive that explains all of that, and you guys can either review this or read that to understand it. But hopefully, you guys have a better understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. So the next section I want to talk about was the big picture of chapter operations. So this really just gives you the whole picture of how this all works. So at the very top, it's kind of hierarchical in a way. I mean, that's fraternities. You have the conclave, which is all the representatives, the venerable dean and chapter advisor of each chapter go to conclave every other summer, and they go and vote on things. So they make decisions. Alongside with the conclave is the council. It's the international council. These men are voted in by other alumni, and they kind of govern the headquarters, which are kind of like the actual administrators of the fraternity, and they make the daily decisions while the council makes the larger decisions and oversees them. So that's the big body up there. Next below them is the Alumni Advisory Board, and then myself, the chapter advisor. We currently are creating Alumni Advisory Board, so that's not here yet, but it will be soon, and I'll be working closely with them. Immediately below them will be you guys, the chapter executive council. And you guys will be making the direct decisions with the chapter. And as I mentioned to you guys before, as advisors, Alumni Advisory Board, we can do certain things, cut off money or really, push you guys to do things. But a lot of it's really in your hands. Just about 90% of all the decisions, maybe 95%, is all to you guys. And then you guys, of course, oversee the chapter members and chapter pledges. So, didn't have too much to talk about the big picture. Just wanted to give you guys an idea of what's all out there and how it all works again. But I quickly want to talk about some major chapter risk management. So, I guess I can say that very clearly. These are the areas that we, as a chapter, need to focus the most on. These are where we have most liability, most risk. The first one, and of course you guys already know this, open parties are very risky. If we can do more date dashes, more Greek events, more closed parties, that's much less risky because we'll have these random people coming in, destroying a house, getting drunk, and then just going out to our parking lot, passing out, and get us in trouble. Other things is, of course, related with that is drugs and alcohol. The biggest one is having drugs in the house. Even though Washington allows weed, we still, under Washington State University and as a chapter, we cannot have drugs in the house. As far as alcohol goes, technically, obviously, underage people are not supposed to have alcohol. As far as for the other age members, not a big deal. Hazing's never really been a big issue for us, but it always can be, so we always have to be watchful for hazing. And so, basic definition of hazing, guys, is always remember it's any, and this is how they use it legally. So, if it comes down to a case where someone gets hazed and they sue us, this will be brought against you. Is that if any sort of mental, physical, emotional, any sort of kind of discomfort, unnecessary discomfort, or sorry, it's not. Let me say it one more time. It's any sort of discomfort brought to the member. So that's a very, very vague and open definition. And so obviously we can still operate, ask things of guys, but the basic thing that we need to be able to do to prevent ourselves from hazing is we have to always have a justified and legit reasons for the things we're doing. So if we ask pledges to do something, it needs to be something that's just justified, mature, and reasonable. Okay, enough about hazing. Reputation and image is not something that's always considered a risk management issue, but it is. Having a bad reputation or a bad incident that ruins our reputation or image is a very big risk to the chapter. As many of you guys know, we won't be able to recruit as well. We won't be able to have exchange with other houses, or it may very well lead to another consequence, like us being viewed as the drug chapter. So then the cops come by our house every weekend looking for a reason to get into our house to see if we have drugs and shut us down. So next one related to open parties is damage to property. This is not just from outside people from like parties, but it's also own members. We need to be able to make sure that members are accountable. Like one example of a system that I think will prevent damage to property is we ask members to give a damage deposit to us. That way, if they do damage the property, we'll just take that deposit, and there's no, if, ands, or buts of collecting the money or getting them to fix it. It's just we can pull that money, not give it back to them, and at least we have some money to fix the damage. And then, of course, as it says in our Constitution, they must address it. It can't be on the chapter. They must address it, whether fixing it or paying for it. Lastly, finances. This is one, again, that we don't always think about, but if we miss out on our finances and we just totally, maybe someone goes off and we're not double checking, there's not two hands in the pot, two people keeping each other accountable, then someone can run. There's been cases where people can just run off with all the money and then the chapter's left with nothing and they can just run into the ground. Or we mishandle finances and we go into $10,000 in debt and then our headquarters will just have to shut us down because we can't pay that back. I'm not too worried about finances, but I guess out of these ones, I'm mostly worried about damage to property, open parties, and our reputation. So, you guys made it through it. Thank you. But before we go, I just want to review quick what we kind of learned in this presentation, and that includes Robert's Rules of Order, such as the use of the agenda, types of motions, presenting motions, voting on motions, and important rules. The big picture of the fraternity operations, and the critical risk management information you guys need to know, or I guess more of the areas you need to keep an eye on. So, thank you, and I appreciate you guys listening to this presentation.